A warm welcome, Dr. Richa Sharma. Once again, you are part and parcel of this group now, and I am just reading your brief introduction. An alumni of Miranda House and St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. Dr. Richa Sharma, presently working as an assistant professor of Tata Institute of Education, Mumbai. She holds a doctoral degree from Jawaharlal Nehru University of Delhi. Prior to joining Tata Institute, she has taught at the University of Delhi and Jamia Millia Islamia. She has also been associate with the Room to Read Deskal Society and UNFPA. Her area of interest includes philosophy of education, epistemology, critical pedagogy, and teacher education. Please take as much time as you like. You can start now by unmuting. Thank you very much.
Thank you and much gratitude for finding me worthy enough to be part of the group, which is so learned, and also inviting me again to present my thoughts, views, and ideas here on the forum. So today, as the topic is peace and education, basically it emanates from my own present quest as an educator. And there is a lot which is going on with respect to education for peace, education of peace, and peace education. So, today I would like to give you a brief sort of a synopsis of how I'm going to go about in my today's presentation. First, I will discuss the context in which I seek to understand Krishnamurti's views on education, particularly as an educator. So this context primarily comes from my academic engagement, where we learn about National Curriculum Framework 2005, which has a focus group paper on education for peace. This document is significant on several levels, but most importantly, it is significant because it advocates the introduction of peace as a subject in the curriculum, and it is in that sense is quite remarkable. There are few other things that this document makes a kind of, which this document actually helps those things convert into a discourse, and these are particularly related to the notion of converting peace as a way of life. It's seek to evolve a movement where vegan is a lifestyle there, and in the similar fashion, this document urges us to imbibe a kind of a lifestyle which in itself is an reflection of peace of both mind within and outside. So if I quickly sort of look at and take ourselves through the major objectives of this document, it sort of it states almost 5 to 6 objectives. One, bringing about peace orientation in individual through education. So peace orientation. And interestingly, this again struck me because in December, first week, in my own institution, we had a workshop with 75 student teachers from across India. And when we asked them to draw their vision and idea or their understanding of peace, very interestingly, um, almost all of them, including myself, the idea had to do with something very personal. So, peace in terms of spending time with my pet, peace in terms of spending time with my loved ones, peace in terms of eating my favorite ice cream. So, these were the manifestations of peace by and large out of those 75. Now, if we take this, if we again go back to the first objective of the document, which says that there has to be an orientation towards peace in education, then taking this incident sort of it sort of buzzes a ring in my mind that if we all sort of most of us, if we imagine something very personal and private with respect to peace, then where is the violence which is all around us in terms of the Ukraine war, in terms of um, what is happening in several underdeveloped countries, what is happening with our own neighbors, how we sort of view China in the aftermath of COVID, how we view Pakistanis when we play cricket with them. So where is that larger vision towards peace for all? So that's where I find that it is pertinent for us as an educator to bridge this gap where mostly our imagination concerning peace is limited to a very private feeling. So one was bringing about peace orientation in individuals through education. So this is where I think this is important that we talk about peace for education for peace and peace education to sort of this particular orientation from being very private to going and be able to think oneself in relation to the whole. Second, it says nurturing in students the social skills and outlook needed to live together in harmony. This, of course, it is kind of a very popular notion, harmony, living together, particularly in the context of country like ours, where there's a lot of diversity on several parameters, be it economic, social, cultural, linguistic, gender, etc. So, what does it actually mean to live together in harmony, and also what does it mean to have a certain kind of social skills which enable us to live in this manner? Then then the third one is reinforcing social justice as envisaged in the Constitution. So with respect to peace education, this is one of the objective in the document. And I'm going through these objectives because I went to Krishnamurti again to seek the questions that I had in my mind as to how do we achieve and attain these objectives. So our first objective is, of course, the orientation. Second, how do we live in harmony with each other? What is that social skill? Third, how do we understand the very idea of social justice? And of course, the values and morals which are there in the Constitution. The fourth objective that this document states is the need and duty to propagate a secular culture. Now, in a nation or in a society where a primary identities in a way comes from in largely from the religion that we belong to, it's there in our surnames. The caste and religious identity are so so ingrained in how we operate on a day-to-day basis. So where would I get this sense that we must propagate secular culture, and what would be the imagination of that kind of a secular culture? Then education for peace also intends towards catalyzing a kind of a very active democratic culture. And how would that then ensure peace in the world? That is the question. And what does it essentially means to be democratic? And then lastly, it also sort of has as an objective of promotion of national integration through education. So when I keep these objectives of this document on one hand, then I have several questions, immediately as I go through these objectives. And in order to seek those answers, when I sort of, look at the literature, the vast literature that I find is written by Krishnamurti, or his several talks and his interaction with his own students and the larger audience, then I feel that there are pertinent points which translates into answer to my questions to all these objectives. So when as an educator who is concerned with these issues, I go to Krishnamurti, then I have answer for what do we mean by peace itself, how peace cannot be understood in isolation from violence and conflict, and then how the attainment of is impossible without a certain kind of education, and that what is the nature of that education is again being answered by Krishnamurti. So that's the format. And lastly, as I go through the answers, I also realize that in social science we theorize concepts. So when you theorize peace as a concept, there is a criticism that it is quite a Western concept, and Indian mind as such uh, has a much wider kind of a conception of peace also. So it kind of results into a binary. So I see that how, coming from the very context which is Indian context, one transforms himself and allows us a much broader and encompassing understanding of the concept peace, education, violence, religion, and holistic. So there are few important concepts that I feel are essential to his understanding of peace, and that I'll discuss subsequently. So as now when I had this and I go back to Krishnamurti, it's something which is very interesting came up to in my search was this book by Professor Meenakshi Thapan, and it is a very recent book. It's titled as Jiddu Krishnamurti, Educator for Peace. So this is a one part of the whole series by Rutledge, where they are which is titled as Peacemakers. So they are coming up with several books which will help promote peace in the world at large. So this is I think this is a very important contribution as an academic, where this book not only gives us a very as a someone who is not trained into the complex ideas which for a layman could be very difficult to discern, then this book sort of simplify some of those concepts for me. And therefore in this part of my presentation I would talk about what is there in the book, and then from there I'll go to my own reflections about it. So as I said, the book came out in 2022, and Professor Thapan herself, being an educator, had an insight that is essential, and someone who was introduced to the idea of Krishnamurti, her understanding is also certain authenticity to it, and that's why I sort of have opted to talk about it. So if you look at the book, it has 5 chapters. Of course, first one is introduction, because it is written with an idea that there could be an audience who might not know Krishnamurti's own background. So the first chapter is, of course, introduction, which I need not to discuss here, because I know that how familiar you are with his uh, background. The second chapter is Krishnamurti's educational vision, and that's an important chapter to my mind. And then the third chapter is educational challenges. The fourth one is where once she's talked about the vision and challenges, then she sort of tries to give us uh, the vision into practice at Rishi Valley Education Center, as to how it is endeavoring to transform those vision into practice. And then fifth, she talks about challenges and continuity. So now for this presentation, I have primarily focused on the two chapters, which is third and fourth: educational vision and educational challenges. Now she is talking in layers. One layer is where she's talking of Krishnamurti's ideas as it is, so she's quoting it. Second layer, where she is comparing his ideas with other educational thinkers of her time, say Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, and Rabindranath Tagore. And the third layer, where she has her own argument and inferences. So I would like to sort of, and this is my understanding of her text. So, I would like to present her text in these three layers. She's first, so I'll talk about the very, first argument that she gives, and that is very essential to begin with, is that contrary to the general belief that Krishnamurti's ideas were utopian, she in fact argues that they were not. His ideas, particularly the educational ideas, were not utopian ideas. If we believe so, that's our ignorance of, or inability to understand his ideas in their entirety. Second, now when she says that that's not the case, then what is the case? So she says that usually we feel them that they are utopian because we do not find any reference to the practical life. So how we see education, how do we conceptualize? So most of the realist thinkers or sociologists conceptualize education as something which reproduces the given. So for instance, if I'm a person who is getting educated, I'm a third generation or fourth generation learner who is getting educated, then of course I have an entire cultural capital in, to support me. And what education does, it sort of helps me to further encase it, accumulate more capital. Capital in the sense, if my parents were academicians, then I have an easy access to the library, to the ideas which are discussed in the household. And see, if my parents were a business person, then so we kind of encase onto those existing capitals and multifold them. So most of the sociologists, they think that education does nothing more than the reproduction. And in that sense, what Krishnamurti is saying is utopian, because he's actually telling that education is capable of transformation which has nothing to do with the reproduction. Now, how do I sort of explain it, and how Professor Thapan has explained it in her book, is that she says that when sociologists, say Althusser, Bourdieu, Parson, etc., when they talk about reproduction, what they're keeping in mind is the hierarchy, which is there in the society, which is apparent. But for Krishnamurti, this hierarchy is inconsequential when you realize your real self. And how do one do it? So then there is a process to it. And in that process, we will see that school is an important site, teacher is an important site, and also the surrounding is an important site to it, to that entire process of transformation. Now, as someone who is trained by the thing, my own teacher were convinced that education does nothing but reproduction. So therefore people with existing cultural capital go higher in the ladder of that social hierarchy as compared to those who are first generation learners or who are coming from the place of disadvantages. I also had this firm belief. So when I read this particular idea, it was striking for me, and I went again and again. And then, as I understand it, what he's saying is that hierarchy and inequality do not necessarily determine our social relationships. We can transcend those. And these social relationships, when we think them in terms of hierarchies and inequalities, basically we are operating with the memory of the past. And that's where, when you have to stop that memory of the past, and then the transformation begins. So now education as an endeavor is an endeavor to allow to enable the learner to think afresh with a mind which is a new mind. So there are few essential concepts. One among them is a new mind. Second is religious mind. Third is goodness. Fourth is holistic. And then finally, the sensitive mind. So these are the terms which comes up in this 2 chapter, and now I'm taking us through these concepts. So now when he says that these are inconsequential, the hierarchies and inequalities which are given, as I also felt, and I'm sure most of us feel that way. And when he says that these are inconsequential, and in fact they do not necessarily determine our relationship, then what is it that we are talking of in terms of transformative education? He says that human subject is imbued with an agency, and this agency has a normative value to it. This agency is sort of normative because it can operate without any reference from the past. But what our the current education is doing is devoiding us of this agency owing to the memory of the past. And what is this owing to the memory of the past is that it teaches us what is already there. It doesn't allow us to experience the new as it is. So when we experience the new, we are experiencing it with the reference from the past. We are categorizing it in the categories that we already have from a past experience. Then how are we experiencing the new if we are allowing all our reference point, all our categorization, classification, and our lenses are from the past? Then how are we experiencing? So similarly, that's what we are doing. We are looking at the society as it is, also in those hierarchies and with those inequalities, with a certain sense of certain very predicament, which doesn't allow us to look at it as in a afresh. So how do we realize this agency? That's the first task of an educator. Just give me a moment. Sorry, there was a knock at the door. So, first, then this is an essential task of education, that it gives it sort of equips the learner with a sense of uh, newness, where there is a cessation of the past memory. And by past memory, if we try to understand in layman's term, and correct me if I am wrong, what he's suggesting is the deconditioning of mind. Deconditioning in the sense that we are conditioned to think that I belong to this gender, I belong to this state, I belong to, this is my language and this is my linguistic community, I belong to this caste, etc. So all our identifications, he comes to identity and identifications. So this belongingness, the meaning that we seek with respect to the place that we belong to and the identity of that place, the linguistic group that we belong to, and then identity in that certain linguistic community. All this is our conditioning through our socialization. And if we have to make education transformatory, then there is a need to decondition ourselves. And as I understand it, it is by this deconditioning that he is talking about when he's talking about uh, the uh, the need to not work with the memory from the past. So then how do we do it? What is the way to do it, to decondition ourselves? So he's convinced that the school is the site for it. A school, because it is a place where you can you have uh, immense potential to uh, to to take the learner from her immediate context to make her exposed to several other layers of her existence. So a school is a site uh, which is which in one way is, it could again be a site of certain limitations, but if you see it in comparison to the immediate background within a family or neighborhood, then school gives you an exposure to the world outside of it. So school becomes that first site, which is essential because it takes you beyond your immediate conditionings. And what do? It gives you certain aspirations. It also it also allows you to experience human relations, which are not merely relations within bloodlines or family or immediate neighborhood. This school is also your window to local knowledge, which is not which is of course much broader than the kind of knowledge that you must have got within your family socialization. And also, most importantly, school is also your first experience as a child with the structures of power. So of course, there are structures within families pertaining to power, but you do not quite realize them in the sense that you sort of, or encounter them in the similar way as you encounter them in the school. So school is a very fertile ground for experimenting uh, 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 with an objective for transformation. And then what Krishnamurti is then saying, he's saying that if we have to have this kind of an education which is transformatory, then there are essentially two things that we are teaching to a learner. And these two things are, we are teaching them about responsibility, and second, about relationships, where one is not unrelated to the other. Now, what kind of responsibility is this? So this is a responsibility as it emanates from your that moral agency. It's a responsibility towards yourself, your surrounding, and then surrounding. By surrounding, he means that it is earth and the nature. So the responsibility begins from within. Then it has to be envisioned as a responsibility towards your surrounding, and that surrounding encompasses not just the the immediate boundaries of your village or city, etc., but also the entire earth and the nature. What is this responsibility? What is the nature of it? This responsibility is of the nature uh, of non-duality. So, and that's my interpretation of it. Non-duality, where when you're being responsible to yourself, must also incur or have this idea inherent in it that you're responsible for your earth, and it has to actually be felt in a way that if you are not being cognizant of what is happening to the earth, then you're basically not being responsible to yourself, because your health, your existence, your significance in this existence all has to do with the broader uh, uh, um, kind of an coexistence. Or coexistence also comes when we are talking in terms of duality, but non-duality in the sense that when you realize and you have this kind of a actualization that a harm that I'm inflicting on the earth is actually an harm which I'm inflicting upon myself. So that kind of a sameness, oneness, non-duality with everything that is there on this in our sense of whatever we experience around us, we have to feel responsible towards it in a way that we are responsible for ourselves. And this responsibility has its origin in the idea that you are a rest of the mankind. So that's where the idea comes from. I see a clear parallel here with Advait Vedanta. I should come to it later on, maybe. So first is responsibility, second is relation. So now when you feel, when do you feel responsible? Do you feel responsible when you're able to detect the relation between the two, say entity A or entity B? So he says no. It's not that kind of relation that we should get into, because again that hampers with our understanding of who we are, and also how we must perceive things around us. It is a relation which is on one level, it is a relation with the self, as well as the realization of that self in relation to the whole. So the relation that he's talking to my mind is the relation which is a realization of you being the whole. So it's not a relation between A or C or among A, B, C. It is a realization of the oneness with the whole. So that realization is it's the relation itself. So with this two objective, it seems, for me as an educator, it seems very difficult. How would I make these understand? These are kind of very complicated, very deep, and very nuanced kind of concepts. So he also then gives us more kind of an elaboration that I see that it is given in this book. He says that role of educator becomes important here in order to achieve these two objectives, that of responsibility and relation, the role of educators is in very significant. Now, what kind of educator this must be? It has to be an actualized educator herself. And an actualized educator would mean the one who has um, understood both the responsibility, and not just understood, but also uh, living, sort of fulfilling those responsibility. And with respect to relation, the one who has realized her position vis-a-vis the position of nature, earth, other human beings, and other living beings on this planet. Now, how do we prepare this educator? This is something that I feel is missing, but this is taken as a beginning point, that when you have the educator of this nature, then there is a clear beginning of transformative education. Once you have this teacher who is or educator who is actualized, who is cognizant of her responsibility and relations, then what are the essential points? I had sort of mentioned 4 important concepts, and as Professor Thapan interprets them, she says translocation is an important way through which, understanding of translocation, understanding of secular morality, and understanding of um, limitations of freedom gives us a way forward here. Now, what is translocation? She says translocation is coming together of local and the collective, of the earth and the humanity, and of the individual and the social, for a movement towards greater consciousness. Here we, so this kind of translocation, we are all transcending where we are transcending the binaries between local and global, between humanity and earth, between individual and social, and also in that movement, in that sort of transition from when we are sort of going beyond the binaries, we are becoming conscious of the fragility of our ecosystem, and also conscious of our own sort of ephemerality in that scheme of existence. And there is the beginning where we are deconditioning ourselves. The moment we understand the ephemerality and fragility of our own existence, there is a deconditioning from the idea as to who we are. I am this, I am that. So the moment we understand that this is ephemeral, this is fragile, there is a beginning. With this kind of translocation, there should be, now this is interpretation of Professor Thapan, where she's saying that once there is a movement towards it, what we actually seeking is to give a solid grounding in the secular morality. I believe she uses the word secular morality because Jiddu Krishnamurti does not align to any kind of ideology emanating from religion, political ideology, etc. whatsoever. So usually, because morality foregrounds itself in either or one or the other kind of religious text, therefore if we are talking about transformation, which is intended by Krishnamurti, then it is essential that we are able to conceptualize a secular idea, which is we are able to conceptualize an idea of morality which is secular, which does not come from any particular set of ideas, set of beliefs, or set of faith. As it reminds me of Scott's, which says that faith is the faith is for the weaker. It's a sign of weakness. The moment you fall for, faith, that's where the weakness of the agency comes in. So I think it's with those ideas that she says that once we are moving towards the translocation, then what we are seeking, we are seeking a culture of secular morality within our classrooms, in the school premises, and then beyond, because then, like, I mentioned, the school is the site which then has a trickle down effect. Here in this secular morality, the notion of constitution comes in an Indian context, because it can be taken uh, as a reference point to that kind of a secular morality, where you have concepts of equality, justice, freedom and fraternity, harmony, and also then this would sort of ensures in peace. But I'm not sure if Jiddu Krishnamurti would also sort of uh, would have uh, would have liked to associate himself with a constitutional morality for that matter, because that constitution also emanates within a particular context. It has its own past, and and there are definite ideological groups uh, which uh, which influenced its coming into the light. So I'm not sure whether he would mm, prescribe to constitution with respect to the morality. But it seems that in her writing in this book, Professor Thapan has inclined towards constitutional morality by way of secular morality. Then she maps it with Krishnamurti's idea of freedom, that even when we are talking about secular morality, we must be cognizant of the limitations that freedom imposes on us. So when we are talking about freedom in constitution, we are certainly missing a point, and that point is that we are talking about a freedom without responsibility. We are actually fostering chaos. We are actually fostering confusion. The idea of fundamental duty might sort of come to counter it, but it hasn't, because we have not really understood what freedom is. So she argues that in our movement towards translocation via secular morality, we must be cognizant of our own conception of freedom, which is limited. It is limited in a way that if we have not understood it well, and if it has not come with a sense of responsibility that Krishnamurti has taken as an objective for education, responsibility towards yourself, for your fellow beings, and towards earth and nature, if we have not understood it in that sense, then this freedom is chaotic, and there would be a lot of confusions. And what then Professor Thapan is arguing, that the present world is actually an example of such a freedom, which is where we see that there is a kind of uh, chaos with respect to our usage of technology, chaos with respect to our relations with our neighboring nations, chaos with respect to an individual's value in that entire scheme of world, and and with the forces of capitalism and market, there is also a kind of confusion as to who am I. Am I the consumer, or merely a consumer, which of course markets wants me to be, or am I more than that? So this comes, as a if there is a misplaced notion of freedom within, I might feel that it's my choice. Whatever I would want to buy, I want to consume, I would do it. But if you have actually not understood freedom, then you are not actually understanding that there are forces which actually have conditioned you to buy certain product in the market. You might not need them. You could very well exist with one set of or two set of clothes in a particular climate, but you feel that you have freedom, and you have freedom to choose from available products in the market, and therefore you sort of indulge into kind of consumerism. So this is kind of an example of misplaced notion of freedom that comes in the text. So what do we what is the way to then correct this understanding? So of course translocation, then movements towards secular morality, but what's in there? So there she brings in a comparison of Krishnamurti with three other prominent educational thinkers, and that comparison is essential for understanding. As I'll go and discuss this comparison, then it will become why it is essential. She says that if we leave Tagore for a moment, then both Aurobindo and Gandhi were talking of education as a transformative force, but with a underlined idea of Indian nationalism. They had a project in their mind for that education. And what was that project? That it was grounded in anti-colonial thought. So you had an enemy, and that enemy was, of course, the colonial forces. And then with that agenda, you conceptualized a particular education. Tagore also, for Tagore, we talk in two phases. So, there was Tagore prior to Swadeshi, and then after it, he completely sort of changed his idea. So, if we refer to the Tagore up till Swadeshi movement, then this anti-colonial, sentiment was also to be found in Tagore as well. Now, this is where Krishnamurti deviates from these thinkers. He says that any formulation of a new idea must not be embedded into any idea, anything which has to do with your past. Like, the new mind, it's a new mind which ceases to have the memory of the past. Second, this kind of embeddedness also points towards a certain kind of conditioning which will unfree you, which is sort of bound you into certain kind of dogmas, practices, which will again limit your horizon. So while on one hand we see that both Gandhi's educational idea has a vision, and it comes from a certain kind of an idea of nationalism, and in Aurobindo it was all the more profound, the idea of nationalism. Krishnamurti rejects the idea of nationalism, patriotism, uh, regionalism to the core. What he says, that it is a disease. Nationalism is a disease, and it sort of because it creates a wall which might be invisible to for a normal being, but it is a definite wall which then creates a distance between that whole and you. So it's sort of in the very first instance, he rejects the notion of nationalism, patriotism, regionalism, or any such syndrome which limits or creates any further boundary or wall between you and the whole. Here, so there is a deviation from what other thinkers were, how other thinkers were conceptualizing education, and how Jiddu was conceptualizing education as. Once we have this conceptualization where there is a responsibility, understanding of relations of one with the whole, and where there is a movement towards translocation, towards secular morality, then you have challenges, which she talks in chapter 4. These challenges are twofold. One which has to do with where they're coming from. So according to Jiddu Krishnamurti, they are emanating from our tendency to identify, tendency of identification with something. So identification with gender, identification with a party, a political party, identification with XYZ categories. And this tendency is then this tendency give birth to conflict, because there would always be numerable factors for you to identify with, in fact identification with, and one kind of identification might come in a way with other kind of identification. So say if you are identifying yourself with being a Hindu, then it is in opposition. It also in factor that you are identifying yourself not as a Christian or as a, so there is a limiting factor in this identification, and also the conflict, because the moment you identify with, there are innumerable factors that you find in opposition to your identity, and that's where is the origin of conflict is. This conflict then results into violence. This violence might not be an overt violence, but a very subtle, ongoing, continuous kind of a violence that you would have within. And unless this violence within is catered to, you cannot have education for peace or neither peace education. So that's the entire entire argument that is drawn in this book, that in order to have both education for peace as a movement where peace building, conflict resolution becomes a way of life, and also having peace as a subject matter in a curriculum, the beginning is in uh, the beginning for Krishnamurti is shunning away these identities. So identities which are limiting. Interestingly, identity is a primary concern for psychologists or psychoanalysts. So Sudhir Kakkar, he talks about identity in terms of, of course, certain features and trends within, but for general psychological understanding, there's a second part, that it is also identity also emerges in a conformity to something external, and that's where Krishnamurti is different. He is rejecting that notion that yes, identity has to be understood as something which is coming from within, but it has nothing to do any kind of conformity to anything which is external, any external condition. So this is where the educator has to really pay attention to, that when smaller children are formulating their notions of who they are, they must be reminded that this does not have to conform to anything which is pre-given to them. And that's where the deconditioning also begin, and that's where he then comes to talk about the new mind. And what is this new mind? This new mind is a mind which is not conditioned by uh, anything, any memory of the past, which includes all sorts of our identities which we have layered upon ourselves. This new mind is also mind which is whole, and whole would mean, and he in one of the lectures he gives the example of this whole, where he says that there is a religious mind to think, I mean, and this religion has nothing to do with the religious sects. This religion, to my mind, has to be understood in terms of the internal volitions. So, those internal volitions, sometimes we also translate it in terms of swadharma. We also translate in terms of religion, but it has nothing to do with organized sects. So one is a religious mind, and this religious mind is a sensitive mind. It is a mind which is which uh, which which operates on the feelings. And then there is um, along with religious mind, there is a um, psychological mind, where or there's a, and then sorry, psychological mind will sort of maps with religious mind, but there is scientific mind, religious mind and scientific mind. So religious mind, he's saying that of course the religion has nothing to do with organized sect. It is an internal volition, which can be translated as swadharma, which is sensitive, which uh, and which is cognizant of the feelings and emotions. And on the other hand, there is a scientific mind which is rational, kind of work in isolation. You do not, it doesn't get affected by what the conditioning is, but for a transformative kind of an education, we need a combination of two. Because we are seeing, when we are saying religious mind and when we are saying scientific mind, our vision is fragmented. uh, the mind is a new mind as a whole, has to be conceptualized as a fresh new mind, which will be encompassing the two, which will encompass both the religious as well as scientific. And this is where the notion of holistic comes in. And this holistic then is something that the modern educationists start talking about in terms of socio-emotional learning along with the scientific and technology. So something that has been a new talk now, what Professor Thapan argues, that has already been talked on several occasions in discourses that uh, Jiddu Krishnamurti has with his audience. And that's where the problem also comes in, that if this is what we mean by holistic education, where there's a when we learn to understand what is the new mind, and then education endeavors to develop these new minds, then how do we bring in the religious mind and the scientific mind together? So for this, the beginning is in the uh, uh, cessation of memory. The beginning is in the sure. So should I there is a message that please be brief. So yes, um, the beginning is in the cessation of memory, then movement towards translocation, movements which allows you to be secular in a way where you are not inclined or affected by any existing sect, religion, ideology, etc., but fresh. And then uh, you also realize your oneness with the whole in a way where the religious mind comes together with the scientific mind. And that's what will free you from the internal conflict. Once you're free from the internal conflict, you would be able to resolve the violence within and outside, and that's what will pave the way for education for peace. And not just education for peace, with that experience we can have a curriculum which will allow us to have peace education as a subject with a definite or manifested forms and practices for us in terms of what Krishnamurti has experimented with in several of his schools. So that's it.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much. Is there anything left you can conclude? If there anything is left,
Maybe some of mine will come in the discussion, so I can bring in there.
Thank you very much. It was informative and a new angle to see the things. Thank you very much. Harshad sir, please. Harshad Parekh sir. Harshad Parekh sir.
Yeah. Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Richa. You have spoken a lot about a new mind, religious mind, but it seems to me that in spite of being a teacher in Krishnamurti schools for many, many years, this thing cannot be taught. But people who are deeply interested in learning about their inner world, they may come to this, whether they go to school or they are not going to any school. But what is required is a very, very deep passion to learn about our own mind. Because Krishnamurti says that to go far, you have to start with what is near. And the near is your own mind. Something is happening inside you. There is a conflict, anger, fear, jealousy. This is a human problem. And so there is a lot of duality, conflict in our daily life. And people who are really interested to be free from all these problems of anger, fear, jealousy, then there is a different way of living, a different kind of mind comes into existence. And if teachers or educators are able to do that, then there may be some impact on student. In Indian culture, peace is given a lot of importance because after chanting every Sanskrit sloka, we say Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. But Krishnamurti says that just by chanting, we don't come to the peace, inner peace. And for that, we have to understand how our mind works and every thought to be seen as it is forming. So Krishnamurti's teachings goes at the root of our thinking and feeling. And he says that there is a different dimension which he calls choiceless awareness. When that choiceless awareness is ignited, then one can really see how these thoughts and feelings are creating problems in relationship with human beings. So only when a Krishnamurti cannot solve the problem of war which goes on between countries at international level, but mostly he's addressing the war which is going on within us in our daily life in relationship. So from that understanding of ourselves comes a new mind which goes beyond scientific mind. Because scientific mind, I feel that it is still connected with the known, and the science means to know, and it works with the known and then goes into the unknown. But the religious mind, it is a fresh mind. It doesn't carry whatever is happened in the past and looks everything very, very fresh, whether looking at a tree or a human being. So the new mind is a mind which is very fresh and it looks in a different way. So Krishnamurti's teachings, he wanted to create that kind of new mind in students and teachers and in the whole world. But it is the most difficult because we have to start with ourselves. It will not come by reading many, many books of Krishnamurti. Maybe one book is enough to ignite a different way of looking, that choiceless awareness. So this is the real aim of Krishnamurti, but I don't think that that is the aim of teachers and students and parents, even in Krishnamurti schools. So Krishnamurti said that probably there is nobody who is really passionately interested in this. So teachings are marvelous, but to bring it back in our daily life is a great challenge. Okay, I have said enough. Thank you very much.
Dinesh Waghmare, please unmute and say.
Are you able to listen to me, madam?
Yes, sir.
Are you able to listen to me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please go
Actually,
ahead.
it is a very debatable subject, and you have opened a very vast subject. Uh, in a nutshell, I would like to only say that whatever you said, we cannot seize the thought. We cannot. Whatever you said is the JK's teachings, then Arvindo's teachings, and this. It means we are always referring the past. So this we have to understand. We have to take the essence of the past, and then we have to see its relevance in today's circumstances. In today's time, when there is a net and there is a mobile and the whole world is becoming one. So whether how much, what is the relevance of all these teachings which were relevant in those times in the past? That also we have to see. You said that there should be a deconditioning, but already you are giving technical knowledge which you say that or everybody say that it's a must. So any teaching, the word itself is a conditioning, that we have to see. Any teaching we are giving to any student, or we are giving him our views, is a conditioning. So and the technical conditioning is a must. And when we say that technical conditioning we are giving, psychological conditioning is already related to it. So whatever you said, the essence of it from the past and essence of all the this thing we have to see, and then we have to see what we can do, because philosophically you are right, but when we at the ground level, the reality we have to face. So we have to see that whatever education you wanted to give to the children or the students for the peace, that basically we should give to our leaders, because all people are following leaders. So and their intentions are not good. So we have to see how we can change their intentions, how we can make them aware about all these things, whatever you said, and then how we can teach the students about the awareness, what the JK talked, or the self-knowing, and the other things, the structure of mind, and how to what are the consequences of greed, anger, and violence. These importance we have to give. The students, in my views, are having bubbling energy, which is going out. So, and they don't have experience of the life, what we are saying. So, how we can give these all, how we can teach them these all things, because they don't have experience. So, they don't have the importance of whatever you said. So, we can only give them the just brief understanding of all these things. And basically, we have to make a movement to teach our leaders. And mass has to understand all these things. Then only I think it is relevant. Otherwise, whatever you said has got very less importance. What do you have to say on this? Thank you.
Thank you. First, I am in complete agreement with Mr. Parekh. As we go to the chapter 5th, where basically my talk was in reference to a book today, a book which I started to read with the questions that Dinesh ji is asking. And when I, in search of answers to those questions that I and you both have, when I ended up reading this book, of course, I realized this one thing, that there's a limitation on limitation on our part as an educator, which Parekh is talking about. And this limitation has to do with the fact, and that's again a debatable thing, that whether it is because of that there is no passion and readiness for the one to seek something from within, or is it the overall kind of uh, the cloud around which has to be cleared out. So I'm not sure whether the problem is emanating from. So if we are to agree with Dinesh ji, then it is probably beginning from, not from the individual, but at the level which is clouding us, so the leaders. But if we again, if we sort of able to communicate and remind ourselves again and again that we are operating with an individual agency, where we need not to listen to a leader, where we need not to listen to even our parents to an extent, if we are able to logically counter their views and worldviews, and be able to also, I think a lot of it also comes from the fear of the unknown, in the sense that unknown is also it's always, it troubles us. We want to chart a given way because it's easy, somebody has gone there. When we are even on trekking in the some part of the country, in some geography, it's like, where is this trek going, and then there are signages, then you feel confident, yeah, this is the right, we will just go here. So I think if somewhere there is, if we are able to communicate, and also not just communicate, but exhibit through our own action as an educator, that it is possible and it is all right to chart the path which is not being charted by anyone else. In that sense, you should question everything which is given to you, from the basic political understanding to family relations. All that is questionable. If you're able to exhibit it in your own action, then there is some beginning in my view. It might be an ideal view, because I'm a very young teacher and have still not a lot of scope, and is fighting spirit. So maybe it's coming from there, that I do feel, and I agree, that not all of it is teachable, in the sense it cannot be taught, but it can be demonstrated, both in your action and in your intent. And if we are able to somehow do that, then there is a certain beginning. I'm not sure.
I wanted to say, madam, 3.3, there are 3 important points. One thing you said, new mind. New mind will always, how do you know that this is a new mind? Always there has to be a reference. So you will always see from the reference of the old mind only that this is a new mind, number one. Number two, we are talking about the worldly peace situation. So when and you yourself said that it's a question of relationship. So when it's a question of relationship, one has to make the circumstances, or you have to improve the conditions, so that this peace can condition of peace can arrive, or it can be reached. So these 2 things are very important. Number 3, again, the education of the leaders. That is very important thing. So we have to go at the root of the problem. Then only we can, I think we can be in a position to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Waghmare. Pradeep Verma, Dr. Pradeep Verma.
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Harshad ji talked about little pessimistically that this cannot be taught, what all she talked about. but I see a definite window that gives a lot of hope. The way as a teacher,
Voice not coming.
as my voice is not there. Hello.
We are hearing your voice, but perhaps
it?
to someone it is not coming.
Okay.
Madam, you are hearing him?
Are you
Dr.
able
Richa,
to?
Dr. Richa, are you able to hear him?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please
Okay.
go on.
So it may not be possible to transfer these things to students conceptually as words, but non-verbally, it is definitely possible, and rather more effectively than words, by exposing students more to nature as much as possible. You see? And the second is, if the teacher is an actualized, as you were talking about, and the way you have imbibed through books, or you came closer to that, I think Meenakshi Thapan also reached ultimately to Rishi Valley. So teacher's persona and life and its closeness, whether teacher is actualized, whether teacher knows, or whether teacher lives this. So being close to such a teacher is good enough to get these things and inquiry about yourself and all that. So there is definitely a possibility how we have gathered together. We are students. I may be with white hair, that's all. But I am a student. So students get it. And it's a possible thing. Otherwise, there is no point of starting a school anywhere. So everything, of course, it is difficult to arrange for that closeness with nature in all sorts of variations. But definitely, nature is a very potent teacher, as well as a teacher as a man or woman who has actualized these things in his or her life. And being close to that teacher, definitely we can learn about these things. This is what I feel. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, please reply this.
No, no question.
Doctor, no, I am not saying anything, Verma, against you or against anybody. I just wanted her comment. Please be patient with it.
This is my
Please
observation.
be patient.
See,
Yeah, please be patient. Please be patient, please.
It's a very short journey to speak from, but nonetheless I will do, because even if it's short, it's an authentic one and it is a lived one. So in this short journey as a teacher, I have realized that a lot of my learning has indeed come from the proximity with a certain kind of teachers who have not said things or asked me to do things, but rather have demonstrated through the way of life. But on the other hand, if I have to bring in a lot of pragmatic and utilitarian issues that our education is inflicted with, and particularly the mass education. And by mass education, then I am actually what I have in mind is the problem of universalization of education in with respect to the idea of justice and equality. So you have equitable access, quality of education. So how many of us are actually uh, are can be assured of proximity of such a teacher? That's the problem. And that's a very pertinent problem, that it is only by chance or an accident that we have the proximity of such a teacher. It is not by design or by a just system that we have proximity to such a teacher or a human being. So I really don't know. I agree that proximity with such actualized teacher can change things for you, but I still believe that is only by an accident and maybe some fortune, if I am allowed to use that word. But not by the justice. We do not have, it's not systematic in that sense, that, and that will remain a problem for us to really work towards. Thank you.
Harshad Parekh, sir. Harshad Parekh, please unmute.
Yes.
Hmm.
Are you able to hear?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Krishnaji was a very passionate teacher, and so many people came very close to him physically and also worked in his schools. But I don't feel that those people who were very close to Krishnaji, they got a new mind. I don't feel, because I have worked in all Krishnamurti schools for many years. So I can say that even if a teacher is very passionate, some few people may get, if the students are also well prepared, or they have a good culture, or maybe what we can say very good sanskara from the past life. So some people, they may not need to be in a school. If they even read a book of Krishnamurti, and then they begin to look inside their own mind, and they begin to really change. And that is the way, for me, I came to a book of Krishnamurti in 1972, and that book itself made me look deeper into myself. And I felt that, yes, what Krishnamurti says is true. And it began to change my life. And then finally, I came to Krishnamurti schools. So it is a two-way thing. A teacher may be very passionate, but the student must be very, very curious and passionate to learn about the inner world. And there are few people in our, even children in Indian culture, like Nachiketa or a Dhruv or a Prahlad. They were little children, but they had a lot of curiosity. And so they could go very, very far. So both is required, a passionate teacher as well as a sensitive student. Both are required to make change in an individual. But to change the whole country, even Krishnamurti cannot do it. And even after 40 years of Krishnamurti's life, wars are going on and people are killing each other. And it had been there even in the past thousands of years ago. Ram and Ravana and Kaurava and Pandava, the wars were going on. And also within human beings, the wars are also going on. But for few people who are very passionate, Krishnaji's teachings can really help. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anand, please be brief. Anand, please be brief.
Yes, sir. Sir, it is very unfortunate, a man who's considered as one of the best teachers the world has come across. He failed miserably to educate even one person, whether in school or anywhere else. That is what he himself said. It came out from his words. So I don't want to go further. You were talking about being responsible, being holistic, nature. I go to nature, it's for my own self. It's for my own pleasurable activities. I don't go nature to see what it is. I mean, the moment the bee is there, the observation is not there. I go stand in forest, hug one tree, stand there for 10, 15 minutes. It gives me pleasure. If I have some problems, now they're saying you can spend a lot of time in nature. It cures you. See my self-centered activity everywhere. And I say I have to be holistic. The point is, who is interested is a question. Am I really interested in what's happening out there? Am I really interested? Or is just, we meet once in a while and discuss to while our times. That's all there is. Krishnamurti was dead against these meetings. He was forced to agree for the meetings at the school. He was against it. He said, you're going to fall back. what the other traditional groups are doing. Same thing. We'll quote Ramayana, we'll quote Mahabharata, we'll quote Krishna, Arjuna, everything. That's all. What I came because of my childhood, which had a tremendous impact on me. I am doing the same thing now. I believe in Krishna. I believe in Rama. Yes. And I say, I read Krishnamurti, I understand Krishnamurti. See what is happening to me, sir. Can you look at that as a question? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anand. Next Sunday, we have lecture by Donald Creedon and time is 6 p.m. Subject is consciousness in Krishnamurti and Mahayana Buddhism, a question of transformation. You all are invited to attend that. Time is 6 p.m. Please note. Ma'am, I am very much thankful to you for your lecture, and I am also thankful to every participant who participated. Thank you very much. Modak, please end it.